Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10, the NFL football podcast over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host, Pete, as always, joined in a couple seconds by my co-host, Brian. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well. It's about a little over a week after the Super Bowl took place, Super Bowl 56, which was the LA Rams, believe it or not, were the visiting team against the Cincinnati Bengals, even though they were in their home stadium, the Rams were, of SoFi. And the Rams walked away with a 23-20 victory. It kind of went down to the wire. We'll get all into the details of the game, but Brian and I both were correct in our pick. We both thought that the Rams, when it came down to it, would be crowned champions. And yeah, especially for me as a Rams fan, it really, really worked out. I'm still living off that high. So with that, I'll welcome Brian in. Brian, how you doing tonight, man? And how was that Super Bowl for you?
Yeah, well, I'm doing fine, but probably not as good as you. Still riding high off that Super Bowl win. It was really a good game. Obviously, we've had a little more than a week now to digest it, so had some time to kind of go through, and I'm sure for you to process what it means to have your favorite team win a Super Bowl, which,
It's
is a
crazy.
feeling that not everybody is lucky enough to feel. So certainly, congratulations to you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure it
Thank you.
was a fun night, maybe a little stressful at times.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
lot to get to with the game, but very, very good game overall. Not a classic, but a good game to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that on a surface level it was. I mean, maybe it'll be a classic probably for me just because it's my team. But yeah, definitely not like the experience that probably most casual fans had of like Eagles Patriots or something like that, right? Like those were recent games that I think of like just insanity down to the wire, just a crazy fireworks show. But I thought this was very much what I kind of said it was going to be when we did the show about 10 days ago is I thought it was going to be more of a defensive battle than people realized it was going to be. And I was pretty close in the score. I originally said 27-24, so 23-20. Should have really been 24 because, the Rams messed up that extra point. But I figured it would be a low scoring game, two really solid defenses. Even though you have the couple weeks to kind of install a game plan, you never know what's going to happen. You saw that very well, what was transpiring in the game there, especially, and we'll get to the kind of the Odell Beckham injury that ended up having. But yeah, Brian, with that, I mean, we get into the game, right? And all of a sudden, it's kind of a slow first quarter. It's like 7-3 Rams. Nothing's really going on. It's kind of what you would expect, right? It was a good start for the Rams, and, the Bengals were kind of trying to find themselves. So you expected that. I think they only had like one player that's on the roster that's ever been in the Super Bowl. And a lot of these guys on the Rams, even though it wasn't in the most important position at quarterback, were very experienced in the playoffs. Were very experienced when the Super Bowl came, and it ended up exactly playing out like that. And then early on here in the second quarter, you had the Odell touchdown in the first quarter. You hit the Cooper Kupp touchdown in the second quarter, and it looks like this game is going to get a little bit out of hand all of a sudden because the Rams are about to go up 14-3, and then the play that you don't even think you don't even think about most of the time as an NFL fan, even though they made it harder a few years ago. The extra point comes up, and Johnny Hecker, with some of the surest hands in football, he's always holding down the kicks there. Never ever messes up. I don't think I can recall since 2012 he's been on the team. I don't think I can ever call since he's been doing those duties him really mess up an extra point. And the ball kind of just slips off his finger, and maybe it's a brand new ball or whatever it was, and the Rams try to make a play of it and nothing happens. And as soon as the game was like 13-3, I knew that point was going to come to haunt them later, and I just felt in that moment that the momentum was going to change in the game just off that tiny little thing. And then that's actually what ends up transpiring for a good about quarter and a half until we got to the fourth quarter. I mean, did you see it? What were you thinking in that first half of the game of how it was going?
Yeah, I was wondering the way it was going if it was just going to turn out to be a Rams blowout because it just seemed like Cincinnati took a while to get settled into the game and Stafford is getting off to a good start. He hits Odell Beckham with that touchdown and Beckham has the other big play before he winds up getting injured, which was such a shame for him. Waited
Such a
for
shame. We'll
this
talk
moment.
about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at least was able to contribute, but a shame that he, was forced out early in the game. But, at least he made his mark on the game. But yeah, the missed extra point, you're right. I think that did kind of open the door up. But, one thing I want to get to where I really thought the Rams made out well was in the second half. You start the half and you get the big touchdown pass to T. Higgins, which, as we know, there was a blatant face
Oh,
mask and it
Jesus
shouldn't have
Christ. Yeah.
stood as a touchdown. The officiating is another story. They basically were calling nothing until the very end of
I
the
know.
game.
We'll get to that stuff because that's been a talking
Yeah.
point.
But the main point I want to make here is that touchdown gave the Bengals the lead. The Rams get the ball back, and very quickly Stafford throws that tip ball interception. But the Cincinnati, after getting the turnover, had to settle for a field goal. I thought that was huge right there that the
Huge.
Rams defense kept them to 3 there. If they had scored a touchdown, I think you very easily could make the argument Cincinnati is going on to win the game.
No, I think that's it's a great point. I think that was kind of the extra point was the first turning point in the game in favor of the Bengals, and then it turned again when that play happens because yeah, we'll talk about here. You go into the second half, right? It kicks off. I'm stressing out. I didn't sit the entire game. I was barely eating. I was standing in the back of my living room, just kind of like freaking out the entire time and just trying to keep as composed as I could. And which I've pretty much done the entire playoff run, but especially for this, because I lived that stuff 3 years ago of watching them score 3 points in the Super Bowl. Like, I seen those things happen. And you get there actually even in the end of the second quarter when they kind of did the fake trick play and, mixing through that touchdown to Higgins, I was like, oh no. I was like, that's not good. I was like, all right,
Right.
they're pulling off a trick play. Like you could see it as, oh, they have to go deep into their bag of plays because they're not solving anything. I saw it more as, oh no, like, we're not prepared for some of the stuff and some of the creativity, and that's how it works out. And then you kick it off into the second half, a blatant face mask, offensive pass interference, whatever you want to call on T. Higgins, just a horrible, horrible, horrible miss by the referees, which, I saw a lot of Bengals fans arguing at the end of the game. You wouldn't have even been in that position, Bengal fans, arguably, if that touchdown never happens to open up the second half, because that changed the
Right.
entire game and put them in the lead. And so just ripped Ramsey's head around, his head twisted. He threw him down. Some people thought he was looking like he was selling it, but then you look at it and you're like, nope, he definitely wasn't selling it at all. And that 75-yard touchdown opens. And then, as you said, yeah, you come right back on the first play. Odell, you knew it was probably an ACL, which it later was confirmed as that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But now you needed some of those other guys to step up. And quickly, the Rams were losing guys left and right? You come into this game, you have Kendall Blanton starting at tight end because Tyler Higbee wasn't making the Super Bowl. Then he has some kind of shoulder issue where he's in kind of a harness and he goes out, and you're bringing in the third stringer Bryce Perkins. So like Rams were losing offensive pieces left and right of kind of weapons for Stafford to throw to. And on that tipped interception, it's kind of like, it just seemed like the chemistry wasn't there between him and Skoranek. That he's played some games this season, but like they haven't spent as much time together as a Cooper Kupp, and he doesn't have the athleticism as an Odell Beckham or as trusty as a Tyler Higbee. And so right there, he kind of either should have let that ball go and not tipped it up into the air, or he should have been right into the open space that Stafford threw at him. He was actually like a step or two behind. That's what caused him to reach out his hand. And of course, the ball pops up in the air and it got picked off. And as soon as that happened, I went upstairs and I screamed into a pillow because I was like, we are in a lot of trouble. And you come right back there, and the Bengals, I think you could deal basically a death blow, as you said. And Donald is the guy who makes the play, comes up with the sack, holds him to a field goal, and then as a Rams fan, I had a little bit of hope. I had a little bit of an exhale, like, okay, we can do this. Like, that was huge, and I felt the same way.
Yeah, no, I really thought it was a big point in the game. I will say with the officiating, because I've heard a lot of people who said, oh, the game is fixed. They let the
Yeah,
Rams
I
on
saw
that last
those.
drive with all those calls. I mean, utterly ridiculous. And what I would say is, I would rather the game be officiated where it's not penalty after penalty. Yes, you would
Yes.
like them to get the blatant penalties like they missed with the Higgins play, but I like the fact that the officials just kind of let it go and it was not a penalty fest, which is what we
Yeah.
see so
I
many
like it was
football games turn
three
into.
penalties before those final couple minutes.
Right. And then, the Rams on that last drive, which, I mean, that drive will, I'm sure, you could probably go play by play, all 15 plays of it. It was just an insane drive that ate up so much time, ending with the Cup touchdown. But I just like the fact that it was not a game where the officials interfered. We didn't have to hear from the referee analyst in the booth, I don't think, at any
Yes.
point in the game. So that to me was all a plus.
Yes, it was all a plus. Now, it's not a plus, as you said, like if you're missing blatant calls. That's not good. And there was some huge ones. I mean, you remember before that, you had a false start and a delay a game on the Rams, and the only penalty on the Bengals was the one where you have you have a player entering the field that was inactive and he wasn't even playing the game. I believe it was Hardgraves that runs on the
Right.
field after that that interception ends up happening, which was just an idiotic move on his part that ended up costing the Bengals 15 yards on their drive. And you could argue that significantly helped the Rams to make sure that drive went nowhere. So just a critical mistake on the part of kind of a young team, and you can't have something like that happen. But as we get down to the Rams, really, as soon as you saw Adele go out, you saw how much he was valued, what he meant to the team,
Yeah.
because they couldn't do anything. As I already mentioned, they were losing guys left and right. They could just not move the ball. Cooper Kupp is getting doubled, tripled, even in some cases. And then you have a situation where they couldn't run the ball at all. There was no
Yeah.
push. And I talked about how stout this Cincinnati run defense is, that they are a good defense with a great pass rush, and they proved it again. And we'll get more back to the Rams run game in just a second. But you get to that final drive, Bry, and
Hmm.
you knew when the game was in striking distance, right? You went, hey, Matthew Stafford, for all the critics, has been fantastic this season in the fourth quarter. No interceptions. He's been fantastic in the fourth quarter in the playoffs, leading two consecutive in the previous two games come from behind when or the game was tied and he led a game-winning drive, or he came from behind like he did by 10 points against San Francisco. So you knew he had it in him. And yet there was still this narrative out there, Bry. A lot of people I saw picked the Bengals. Yes, there was a lot of people that picked the Rams, but there was a lot of people that picked the Bengals, and there was still people picking them because they did not trust Matthew Stafford. They still did not trust what he had, never mind what he had did for 3 games now in the playoffs. He's won more games in the postseason, or I think now it's more games in the postseason than in the last 5 years Aaron Rodgers has in one postseason. But yet we're still have this narrative around that he can't do it, even though he's losing all his weapons. And in that final drive, they finally did what I was asking them to do. They finally said, you know what? I don't care if Cooper Kupp is double covered. I'm gonna throw it to him. You're gonna know I'm gonna throw it to him, and I guarantee you won't be able to stop us anyway. And they finally did that. You had to go to your best players. And in speaking of the run game, I thought it was a great job by McVay, even though there was a couple times I did get frustrated that I thought they were running it and they shouldn't have. At least if you're going to run it, run a little bit more of creative calls. I would have liked to see if they did a little bit more stretch runs kind of to an outside zone. They were doing very much in between the tackles, which clearly wasn't working. You're undersized and just not talented enough on the interior of your line. Stop doing it. But the reason why he was doing it is because I saw a few people say this, and I thought, and I agreed as soon as I was watching the game, is that we remember as Ram fans and analysts and people, and I'm sure you remember that in the 2018 season, the 2019 Super Bowl that went against the Patriots, McVay couldn't run it early on, and he got away from it very quickly and became very pass happy with Jared Goff, and it played right into Belichick's hands. I think he did a very good job this time of even sticking with the run, even though it was going nowhere, just so you make the Bengals think just for a second, could they break off a big run here? Could they be doing a play action? Could they actually run it? I think that was a very well designed, and I think that was McVay clearly learning from his last Super Bowl. I mean, did you see it the same way?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I think talking about the running game in this game and how you were referencing the final drive, you have to get to the 4th and 1 play. And let me just ask you first, I mean, at that point in the game, which you could probably give me the minutes and seconds that were left. I want to say it was 3 minutes and change, but were you saying at that point they have to go for it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. When they ran the Cooper Cup rush around play,
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. You were at, I think, about 5-ish or so minutes, I think it was at that point in the game. And I just didn't want to give the Bengals back the ball where they could potentially ice the game, one, because you needed a touchdown. And two, if you even got the ball back, you're going to use all your timeouts. You still need a touchdown, and you're probably getting it back, best case scenario, a minute, a minute and a half maybe, and it was going to be very difficult. I was like, if you were going to lose this game, you have to lose it on offense, which has been, the makeover of the offseason and getting Stafford. He has to be the guy with the ball in his hands at the end of it. And so I 100% agreed in that moment that they had to do that. They had to go for it. And you have
Agreed.
that play happen. And as soon as Cup busts that open for about, I think it was 7 yards, as soon as that happened, I went, okay. Not only we had a successful run, which I thought was a very ballsy call to call in that moment, but then now I felt like we had some momentum going. Now I thought, hey, we're creeping up into our middle of our territory already. We're getting to that point. Now I thought they got a little bit of confidence. And the players talked after the game, Whitworth and Cup and other people, that they had practiced that play and installed that in the game plan for the last couple weeks. And they felt really good about that play if a position and a moment came down where that had to be called. And so they were confident enough to call it. It's something I probably wouldn't have called, an end around to our wide receiver, especially particularly that's usually a play that you use with a Robert Woods. Kupp has done that before, those jet sweeps, but it's not like his specialty. And to kind of do a half jet sweep, half run out of the backfield as he's in motion, I thought it was a really ballsy play, and I loved it. I knew we had a great chance as soon as we converted.
Yeah, and the thing that I liked about the play was the Rams said we're gonna put the ball in the hands of our best
You had to.
player on
Yep.
offense.
Yep.
And that to me, like if they stopped him, you say, well, we put the ball in Cup's hands, he didn't get it done. But that's who you had to go to, and that's what
Had
they
to.
did. I thought it was just great execution. And then, you look past that play, it was really Stafford just force feeding the ball to Cup at that point. It was like, I don't care how many defenders are on him, double team, triple team, I'm just going to him. And time he did. The throw over the middle where he whistled it
Oh,
past
the
the
no look.
linebacker.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
was just a great play. And then, you get down in the red zone, you get the penalties certainly helped. But how about the idea that before the go-ahead touchdown, that Cup actually had another catch in the end zone that would have been a touchdown. He took a wallop of a hit,
Yep.
but that came back on a penalty. So he had to basically score twice to get the go-ahead touchdown.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I thought, they called a holding on Havenstein on that play. It did look like a holding, but it wasn't like egregious, right? Okay, whatever. But another thing that Bengals fans and people don't want to talk about is that, was that not a penalty that should have been? I don't understand how an unnecessary roughness penalty happens on Von Bell, a holding happens on Havenstein, and they're like, one's a 10-yard penalty, one's a 15-yard penalty, and they're like, yeah, those offset, those cancel out.
Yeah.
You just targeted a player to the head. I mean, come on. It's hard for me to believe in that moment that Von Bell did not know what he was doing. He loaded up. He hit Cooper Kupp right in the head. I understand everything is bang, bang, and I get all that stuff, but you could see it. You could see him lining up for it. I don't understand how that is an offsetting penalty, and that Bengal fans and other people that hated the Rams wanted to complain about, oh, well, you were gifted penalties. You were gifted this. First of all, I thought those were penalties, and we'll talk about it in a second, but I just thought that was egregious. In what world is an unnecessary roughness penalty and a holding penalty cancel each other out?
Yeah, that's true too. And after that hit, I think Cup was like down for an extra minute. It was like, oh gosh, I hope to God he's not hurt because I mean, if they him, obviously, that would just be
Oh
monumental.
yeah,
But
he was.
fortunately, he was able to get up.
Thankfully, yeah, I thought he was going to have a concussion when it had to come out. And then you saw, I think, during the game, but you saw after when they kind of played the audio sound bites of guys mic'd up. Did you see the play where Stafford ran in there and he was like super pissed off about that? And he was trying to defend his guy and he was going after Von Bell. He was looking for him. So I like that, kind of spunk from the QB of defending, your guys and especially your best guy, your moneymaker there in Cooper Kupp. So I liked kind of the energy of that. And, it's something that you didn't see, I saw a couple Ram fans say, and I agree with this. I don't think this is, 2020 hindsight. You didn't see that kind of energy and fire and standing up for your teammates with our last QB in Jared Goff. So it was nice to see kind of some of that stuff. And then we get down to the two Bengal penalties after that, where you get the, Eli Apple play and the Logan Wilson play, right? And so the Logan Wilson play, I know people are really, really held up on, which was just before the nullified touchdown that Kupp had. And to me, I thought that was defensive holding because if you look at it from the side camera angle, if you're looking at the sideline and it's shooting down the line of scrimmage, Logan Wilson, a great linebacker, someone I've talked about on this podcast, on this show, as you know, was literally holding and controlling the hips, in my view, of Cooper Kupp. So to me, even though he's not egregiously ripping his jersey off, he's inhibiting him moving on the goal line there and preventing Kupp from doing those moves that he's so famous for that shake defenders. He's holding him to him, and he's holding his hips. So to me, I thought that was a penalty. I mean, did you see it that way, or did you not think it was a penalty?
I did, and that's the thing is like, a lot of fans are whining about the calls down the stretch. Well, they were penalties, and I guess maybe the point is, well, they hadn't called much through the game, but those were obvious penalties, and it's not like it just worked one way because the Rams got jobbed, as we talked about with the call on the Higgins play, which was a 75-yard touchdown. So, yeah, I thought the penalties were certainly clear enough to call, and I don't think the officiating really determined the game one way or the other.
Yeah, and the other big one was people were talking about in the first half when Ramsey kind of grabbed, I think, Higgins' jersey a little bit, and then we ended up stopping him, and they kicked a field goal, and they were saying that was holding. Yes, that was technically holding, right? That was Ramsey kind of, doing that tugging, pulling the shirt. But you know what? If you want to say, oh, we were going to score on that or whatever, you don't know that. You would have still had to get the ball in the end zone. But even if you want to say you would score, okay, well then that was equaled out in the Ramsey T. Higgins play. Okay, so you got it back. If you thought you were going to score there, you got a gift later on Ramsey on the same two players to open up the second half. So those plays are nullified already. They're over with. So to bring that up later about the Logan Wilson play or the Eli Apple play, which I also thought was defensive pass interference on Cooper Kupp. I mean, did you think that?
Oh, I did, for sure.
So I don't understand what people were crying about. I think it was just the idea, as you said, that it hadn't been called all game, and now people just they thought it muddied up the game in the last 2 minutes. I thought those were fair calls, and I think if you were looking back at the game and they did not call those plays, and the Logan Wilson play to start, and the Rams have a 4th and goal from the 8-yard line, and they do not convert it, you're going to be looking at that, especially I know I would have as a Rams fan of like, you robbed us. You robbed us on the Higgins play, and you just robbed us literally yet again. And so I felt like it was a pretty solid game. It was called pretty well. There was mistakes here and there, but I thought when I say it was called well, it was made up for it, whether they meant it or not in some ways. And those final 2 calls I thought were completely justified actual penalties. And I would have said that the other way if it was the Rams committing those penalties. And I know people will say, oh, that's easy to say now. I would have. I've been ragging on my team all season long. And so I definitely would have called that. I just think those were the proper calls in those moments.
Yes, as we know, you're the Rams fan who picked Arizona to win the game the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
But hey, at least you got your prediction right when it mattered most. So that's
right. I went 1-3 on Ram picks in the playoffs, but I guess it worked out.
But yeah, I think we should get to the 1-yard touchdown. At that point, a lot of times, of course, the play is a run, but with the Rams' lack of success with the ground game, you probably figured going into that play, they're throwing the football there.
Yeah, I was like, they're either going slant or fade route to Kupp. You just knew they were gonna. He's the best player, and then the Bengals, how do they not know what's coming? Because they go one-on-one with arguably their 3rd best corner on the team who had been getting roasted the entire game and the entire playoffs, no matter what he says on Twitter. I thought that was poor design on their defense's part and on their defensive coordinator's part. And yeah, easy pickings for Kupp, easy touchdown.
It really was. I mean, that's the thing about it, is the play was just easy. Like, there was nothing complicated about it. It was just a simple throw and catch, and not much doubt about it. So yeah, I agree with you. The defense certainly questionable. We know we've applauded Cincinnati for the way they played
Yes.
defense during the playoffs, and they really did a great job, especially in the Chiefs game, the AFC title game. But certainly some questionable plays like that one in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I thought they also did a great job against the Rams and the offense and the weapons, even though they were losing pieces. I thought they did a great job. It's just that's a really questionable decision in that moment. I don't know if they were flustered with substitutions and were aggravated about the penalties. It just seemed like a really odd choice to have not your best corner one on the outside with no safety. There was no one over there against Cooper Kupp, who had been killing you the entire drive. I just don't understand that. And that back shoulder kind of fade, even though it wasn't, completely back shoulder. It's something that Kupp and Stafford have been doing all season long. So just a missed call on the Bengals' part, and it cost them in the end, especially for a Super Bowl.
Right, and up until that drive, Cup was having a good but not a typically dominant Cup kind of game. You mentioned the touchdown early in the game, but up until that last drive, his numbers were fairly pedestrian, like for his standards. So it wasn't really that he came alive until that last drive. But then let's get to when Cincinnati gets the ball back. I'm thinking they're easily getting into field goal range. There's
That's what
enough
you thought?
time
Yeah.
here. Weapons that they have, yeah, I thought for sure they were getting to field goal range, and I felt so much better about it after the first play. You get a
Yeah.
17-yard gain
Yeah.
on the pass to
Yeah.
Jamar Chase, and I'm saying they're already there. You
I
got
wasn't
a
feeling
kicker.
good, Bri. I wasn't feeling good.
I'm sure you weren't, especially because you know how good the kicker is, McPherson.
Yep, know
His
him well
kicks were
from
just
from
like
Florida.
dead center all playoffs. I mean, he was just a machine. But then, as we know, your defense and your big man steps up. They get it to fourth down, and I'll let you take the reins with Aaron Donald taking over.
Yeah, I mean, you have a moment there where as you said, the 17-yard play starts off, and I went, "Oh, this is bad." And then you had the 9-yard play to Tyler Boyd, and so now the Bengals are on the Rams' 49-yard line with
Yep.
54 seconds left and second and one. I said, "Oh, we're in a lot of trouble." They basically gain 5 or 6 more yards. They're really in McPherson's range, and I just gotta hope he misses the kick. But at that moment, I'm also thinking, man, are they gonna pick up even more yards? And this is just gonna be a chip shot kick, and we're going to OT. And I did not like our chances given how many players we were losing, and the momentum would have been with Cincinnati. I didn't like that at all, and I was just praying that my defense and that man Aaron Donald, who wanted that ring, who's been pointing to that ring finger, who pointed to it after the sack, almost sack, which ended up being the interception against Garoppolo in the NFC Championship. I knew that we had to make a play. And second and one, it happens where, Burrow drops back, he takes that shot down the field, and as the ball's in the air, I said, oh, they're taking a shot. Like, they're trying to get a touchdown. They're trying to win this game. And then the ball goes, just drifts out of bounds. And right when that happens, I said out loud to everyone that I was with, I said, that was a mistake because they just wasted a down and it's third and one and then it's going to be fourth and one and they're going to be confused about what they have going on. And as I'm holding my breath in that moment, I said that was a gift. And the P. Ryan play, they run it up the middle and for, Gaines was involved, but for Aaron Donald to basically he's being blocked by the guard to pull P. Ryan back with one arm to stop him from getting the first down. I was like, oh no, you in trouble, Bengals. And so that fourth down play, I knew we were stopping them. I was like
Yeah.
99% confident, even though I was nervous as hell because I was like, now you're in trouble. You haven't picked up 1 yard in 2 plays, and you got Aaron Donald who just ate on that last play. He's going to be coming for you. We got 7 sacks tonight already. And they go another strange play. I don't know if they confusion or whatever, on the offensive line, but they go one-on-one, Spain versus Donald, one-on-one with the guard, and he just blew right through him, gets Burrow, ball spins up in the air, and for a second I held my breath because I thought that the ball was going to land miraculously in P. Ryan's hands, who was standing right there. It dropped to the turf, they couldn't find it, and I couldn't believe it was real, Bri. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, what were you thinking on those final, 3 plays, basically?
Yeah, well, like I said before, I certainly was thinking they were going to get into field goal range. I mean, I think you covered it well. I honestly forgot about a couple of those individual plays, like the shot play down the field
Yeah.
and the play Donald made before the fourth down play. But It really what it came down to was the best players delivered for the Rams,
They
right? We
needed to,
talked
yeah.
about Cup on offense. He delivered the go-ahead touchdown, and who seals it? But Donald, who I mean, maybe you could say better than Cup. I mean, 1 and 1A on the Rams. They're each the dominant player on each unit. I mean, Donald's just had an unbelievable career, and there's more I want to get to with him because I'm sure you heard about the
Yes.
rumors,
Yeah, we'll
which
get to
which I
that
kind of
stuff.
was surprised by a couple different people on the Rams, including the head coach, but we'll get to
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I mean, to just spin him around like that, and you just knew the game was over was just what I really just thought about was how it was the best players delivering for the team that won it, and I think like if you were to write a script for the game,
Right?
that's exactly how you'd write it, and just a job well done.
Yeah, you see sometimes in the Super Bowl, remember the Malcolm Smith again, in the Seattle. We saw, at the time, the interception, that happened in the Seattle Patriots Super Bowl that ended up happening. We've seen players that kind of, that was Malcolm Butler. We've seen kind of players that at the time weren't big names, maybe never became big names, kind of in the case of Malcolm Smith, make big plays. But this game was perfect. It was a Hollywood script because you needed Cup in that last drive, and then you needed Donald to make those stops. And Donald was having a great game. Von Miller was fantastic all game. What a pickup you want to talk about for that playoff run. Led the entire league in the playoffs in terms of QB pressures. He was just fantastic. He had 2 sacks. Donald had 2 sacks. And they had 7 overall as a team. Burrow, once again, couldn't be protected. And it came down to Donald getting the ring that he has so coveted now for the last 8 years, which includes this year. All the suffering he went through in St. Louis and in that first year in LA. And I was just so happy for him. I was so happy for the guys. Just an incredible feeling. Maybe around here or so, I'll kind of insert the video I took on Snapchat of me just reacting.
Interception wasn't like the worst thing in the world. Like it was a punt, it's a touchback at the 20, and then the second one wasn't his fault at all.
And you know
The
what?
guy dropped it.
They might give Cole MVP.
Super Bowl champs, baby.
I was kind of just speechless, so I don't really say anything but Super Bowl champs, but just an incredible feeling, man. It was just awesome.
Yeah, and we kind of skipped around a little bit in the second half, but I think you summed it up well that the Rams defense and the front 7 really got after Burrow and made life very difficult on the 7 sacks. And we saw Cincinnati somehow come up with a win when Burrow was sacked. Was it 8 times in the
9
Tennessee
times.
game?
Yeah.
9 times in the second round of the playoffs, but too much to withstand this time around. So yeah, the Rams really they played to their strengths, and I think that's what it was about more than anything.
Yeah, it was. It's so surreal that it still happened, and to think, to give that rant that I did in midseason when the team was spiraling and had 3 losses in a row and looked horrible and looked like they had a gauntlet there in the second half, and then kind of some of those teams fall apart. They kind of find some ugly wins. I think about that Baltimore game. They had some ugly wins. And to pull it out and now be Super Bowl champs, 2nd year in a row, a Super Bowl champ in their home stadium. Never happened before, and now it's happened 2 years in a row. Just incredible. On the other side of it, because we'll talk a little bit more about Rams in a little bit, but for the Bengals, I think they should be proud of what they accomplished. It was kind of a Cinderella run, even though they're a very talented team. I would caution some people that, even Burrow said after the game, we'll be back here, we're young, blah, blah, blah. 100% possible, but given the gauntlet of the AFC, given that we've seen many QBs, think about the legend Dan Marino. 2nd year gets the Super Bowl, never gets back there. Think about Rodgers has been to the Super Bowl once, and he actually won one. He's only been there 1 time in his whole illustrious career. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And to think about, how historically cheap Cincinnati is, how bad that offensive line is, you're in a conference with still Bill Belichick, and still with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Lamar Jackson. And if the Colts can maybe get their QB situation right, who knows what happens with Trevor Lawrence? I mean, Tennessee is still extremely formidable. It's not going to be easy. And I would caution it to, it kind of felt like this was their shot. And now they dropped to 0-3 in Super Bowls. And I think it was an impressive run. I think it was an impressive performance in the Super Bowl. But ultimately, you gotta you got to retool that offensive line, because if you don't, not only you're not going to get back here ever again, Joe Burrow is going to be Andrew Luck. I'm telling you right now. He's going to be Andrew Luck if you do not get this man an offensive line. The Colts messed around and did the same exact thing, and then he got a great offensive line basically as he was retiring. You need to get this man protection. You wanted to say, okay, we'll pass on Penei Sewell. We'll get Jamar Chase. Both players played great this season. Sure, right? Chase wins an award, all that stuff. Now, this entire offseason, you need to pull a Kansas City, and that entire 1 to 5, you need to really question all those guys, and you got to replace at least 3 of those guys on that offensive line. Talent needs to happen. Free agency, draft, they better get on it. I mean, do you think that's kind of the biggest need and the way that the Bengals kind of get back to another Super Bowl?
No doubt. We know this team is talented on offense. They got terrific playmakers. Jamar Chase looks like he could be a special player. T. Higgins looks like a terrific player. So they have weapons. They're going to score points. But the thing is, you have to be able to protect the quarterback. It's pretty elementary in football. You can't get the ball to these playmakers if the quarterback's constantly going down. So yeah, I'm with you. That's got to be emphasis number one. And as far as the team as a whole, I agree with your point. I think a lot of times fans get caught in this trap that they see a team make a run, get to a Super Bowl, and lose, and think, oh, this is only the beginning. We're going to have this many chances, and it just doesn't tend to work that way. And I know sometimes I cross over into other sports, but when the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, we thought for sure that was the start of, if not a dynasty, a team that was going to be back multiple times. Well, it didn't happen, and that group got dismantled. It doesn't just happen in baseball. I mean, there's a lot of teams that we see have a good run, and that's their one chance. And even though they had that good year, it doesn't necessarily happen year in and year out. So when you get to the Super Bowl, you got to make your most of that trip. And it's not just like, okay, we're going to come back next year and be right back in it, especially with, as you outlined, the other teams that are in the mix and the bevy of great quarterbacks in the AFC. It's not going to be easy. I mean, can they do it? I certainly wouldn't rule it out. But you can't get caught in the trap of, oh, we didn't win this year, but we're going to be back this year, and this year, because it doesn't tend to work that way.
No, and remember, that's without mentioning Derek Carr and how the Raiders team that's building there, now Josh McDaniels, if that works out, that's without mentioning that if Aaron Rodgers, which I don't think he will, but if he leaves and goes to Denver, I mean, so it's only going to get harder. The conference is a great conference, especially at the top of kind of the QB class. It's kind of transitioned the last few years from NFC to now AFC. I just don't think it's going to be that simple. You have a historically cheap owner, cheap franchise, and I think right now this is your window once again, because you're not paying a lot of these star rookie and second-year players. Can they make a most of it next year or the year after? I have some serious doubts. Do I think they'll be in the playoffs? Sure, I think they could. But also, I think if you told me, hey, they weren't in the playoffs because A, B, and C got injured and these other teams kind of rose to what we expect of them, I also wouldn't be surprised. So they got to be careful. They got to really do a good job here of recognizing their window and kind of the QB talent that they have with Joe Burrow. Bri, before we wrap up the rest of the Super Bowl, I just want to get your thoughts on the Super Bowl MVP. I personally, while I love Cooper Kupp, and he was absolutely crucial to winning that Super Bowl, especially in the last drive, I actually thought the MVP should have went to Aaron Donald for how he played, what he did for that defense, the key stops that he made, especially in the second, third quarter, to keep the Rams offensive in it when they were sputtering. What says you? I mean, who was your MVP in your mind?
Yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, I certainly could see either way. I think the thing is, in order for a defensive player to win it, they got to come up with, like, a big interception or fumble recovery. Like, the sack numbers are all well and good, and we know he made the final play, but he didn't have, like, that one play, a scoop and score fumble for a touchdown, something like that. I think is usually what they need to see from a defensive player to win an MVP. So I wasn't necessarily surprised. I first thought you might say you were going to look at Stafford as the winner, but you going with your defensive roots there, that certainly shouldn't have surprised me. Yeah, I think it was a toss-up. I wouldn't have had a problem if Donald won, but I just think that's what it comes down to. Didn't have enough like game-breaking plays.
I just think what he did, I thought it was game breaking enough to keep the team in the game, that he was getting consistently double teamed, even triple teamed, to make an impact, to have the 2 sacks, the huge one that held him to the field goal after that interception of Stafford, as we talked about, to make the final play. I think everything that he did and how he was consistent from start to finish, I thought that's why he deserved the MVP. Kupp was good early on his touchdown catch. He was good in the last drive, but he was contained, right? Stafford, I thought, the one pick wasn't really his fault to Skoranek, but he still threw it. Then you had the other one that I thought was a stupid pick where he kind of just tried to, backyard play it and make a throw down the field. I thought that was an idiotic play. There wasn't enough for me to show consistency, even though he was under duress and he was losing his weapons. I thought the only reason the Rams are in that game and they win this Super Bowl is because of Donald and that defense, and I think he deserved it. I'm not completely upset Cooper Kupp got it, but I would have given it to Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I think what put it over the top probably was the 4th-and-1 conversion.
Yeah.
I think that was probably a big factor considering the game could have ended right there. The fact that he extended it and then went on to have just a killer final drive. I think that's what sealed it.
Yeah, I think there's only 2 other players that ended up in their career having a triple crown in receiving and then also winning a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP. He's the only one to do it all in the same season. So,
yeah.
That kind of shows you just the level that he was on. And, people talk about, hey, will the Rams be back? Will they be able to repeat and defend it? I don't know. They're losing a lot of players in terms of free agency. They're up against the cap. The NFC still has some good teams. They're in the hardest division in football. We'll have to see. But this is solidified in history that you can't take this title away from them. They have it. The ring is theirs. And I'm just so proud of those guys. My heart goes out to everyone there, and just what a ride, what a season. The ups and downs, the heart attacks and stress and blood pressure rising that they caused me just feels great. I was a little kid. It's one of my earliest memories when they won in '99. But I didn't know football obviously as well. I was a young kid, and to know what it means to suffer through all of those damn years that I suffered. 1 in 15s, 2 in 14s, everything I went through. I know what it's like to be at the bottom of the league every single year. And so to climb this mountain, to redeem ourselves from the 3 years ago, from the 2018 Super Bowl, it's hard to describe. It really is.
Yeah. I'm sure you don't want to rehash some of the names of the quarterbacks that you watched from, Mark Bulger to Sam Bradford to whoever else.
Case
Some had their
Keenum,
moments, but a lot of tough ones.
Fitzpatrick, Keith Noll. I mean, there's just been so many people. Obviously, Goff. I mean, there's just been so many people that were good but not good enough, or just subpar. I've seen everything on that team, and to get to the top of the mountain, even if it's just 1 year, to go all in, to do what we did, to, the F them picks meme. You saw Les Snead wear that at the Super Bowl parade. Just incredible.
And that's the thing too, is you talked about, can they repeat? That's like the last thing that should be on you or any fan's mind right now. Yeah, you just revel in the fact that you just won a Super Bowl. It always kind of cracks me up. That's one of the first things after the game ends is you see the odds come up for who to win the Super Bowl the next year. It's like, who's looking at that right now?
Right, the teams are going to change so dramatically. Draft, free agency, anything. You just don't know what's going to happen, who's going to surprise you. All I know is they play in the toughest division of football. It's going to be hard to do, but you know what? What I know is you can't take this away. They did it. They won it in their home stadium. Hopefully they gained a lot of Ram fans doing that they could keep even when they're going to have downtrodden years, which will happen. Every franchise goes through it. And I'm just so proud of all those guys. It's just awesome. It really is. In not so awesome news, since we're wrapping up the Super Bowl, just in the parade, I feel like I have to talk about this. What'd you make of all the controversy kind of talk going on the Stafford situation at the Super Bowl? I'm sure you saw what ended up unfortunately happening with the photographer there at the Super Bowl. I mean, what'd you make of any of that stuff?
I'm gonna be honest with you. You're gonna have to fill me in on here because I did not hear about the controversy that went on with Stafford.
Oh yeah, I totally will for you and everybody out there that hadn't heard of it. Yeah, so basically, players tend to drink and do some stuff when you're celebrating the Super Bowl, and Stafford was no different. He was definitely drinking heavily, and so at this point he was drinking water, probably tried to calm himself down. And there was an unfortunate situation where a photographer, I do not have the woman's name, but she basically, I guess, just kind of lost track of where she was, kind of the awareness of what was going on as she was taking photos of Stafford and other Rams on stage. She unfortunately ended up falling backwards, and she fell about 10 feet off the stage. It was a very high stage, and ended up fracturing her spine. And so Stafford got a lot of heat on Twitter when the Super Bowl was happening, and a lot of people ended up talking about it on talk shows and stuff like that, because you could see him mouth, "Oh shit," like he says that, and then he kind of walks into the other direction. He kind of just beamlines away from it, because in my mind, what was he gonna do in that situation besides like hang over the stage or something? Now, yes, was it a bad look? Sure. I think he could have went over there drunk or not and said, "Hey, are you okay?" or something like that. But I think he wasn't in his right mind. He wasn't kind of in the best stage there. And what is he going to do in that situation? He's not a medical professional. But with all that being said, I don't think it was a great look. At least his wife, Kelly Stafford, was right there. She immediately went to the edge of the stage and seemed like she was signaling for help. People helped the young woman out right away. Obviously, there was some other caveat to the story that came out afterwards where people kind of did a deep dive, as they do on this woman's Twitter, and found some, let's call it unenlightened post from about a decade ago. That doesn't kind of take away the moment of what ended up happening to her and what Stafford did or did not do. But I know that was kind of the other wrinkle to the story that came out a couple days after all this happened. So, yeah, it wasn't a great look. People were questioning kind of Matt's morality and kind of what kind of guy he was. And so it was just kind of a sour kind of thing where I'm finally celebrating a Super Bowl and everything going on. And then that was the talk of all last Wednesday, what ended up happening at the end of the Super Bowl parade. So, yeah, so, I mean, as I filled you in there, I mean, what do you make of that? You could probably look it up after this. I mean, just... It's just I can't. The Rams and me cannot have everything just be smooth. They just can't.
Yeah, I mean it's an unfortunate situation, and it's unfortunate though that these parades at times, can get that way where things kind of get out of hand. I'm not really one who watches I mean, I'm sure if one of my favorite teams won,
Then you would.
I would watch the parade. Otherwise, I don't really care that much about the parades. I don't really need all this rah
I
rah,
agree.
cheeriness, especially with players, kind of losing control themselves, which, I'm not saying Stafford did in this case, but obviously he was under the influence. So yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate situation. I think Stafford's, though, his reputation, I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I always felt that he was known as a pretty good guy all his years in
That's what I
Detroit, and
thought.
yeah, so I mean, I think this is kind of an isolated incident that I think people should just move past. I don't think he deserves to be grilled too much for it. It's unfortunate that it happened. Maybe he could have handled himself better, but wouldn't make too big of a deal of it.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly. I think that's well said. That's exactly how I felt. Obviously, they did it for the PR later on when they were getting blowback, even though I think they would have done it anyway. But both Matt and Kelly came out and said that they're obviously covering all the medical bills of this woman. But, I think it also blew up too because kind of Barstool Sports ran with it and they were kind of saying it in a joking manner. And then that woman actually ended up tweeting back to them that, it's not really that funny. I actually ended up fracturing my spine. And so that's kind of where all that stuff rolled from. But yeah, it wasn't the greatest look, but I don't think he deserves to be crucified the way he was. I don't think he's a bad man at all. I think it was just a poor judgment in that situation, considering you're under the influence. And while there's nothing you could have really done, yes, you could have showed a little bit more of sensibility and checking on her, but I'm sure he heard about it extensively, especially from his wife afterwards. And I'm sure they got the kind of the quickest updates on what ended up happening with that woman. And then, just the other wrinkle to it, for Twitter history, all that. I think people just have a lot of time kind of on their hands of what's going on in the world, and we shouldn't just get so quick to try to cancel people. I think that's an issue that becomes Ram or not anything. I was like, you're really gonna. This guy's never done anything wrong, and then he's under the influence, and he didn't. It's not like he pushed her off the stage, and I thought that it went a little too far. I was deep into the hole of Twitter on Wednesday.
Yeah, well, when social media gets involved, things can get run out of proportion. But just one thing I wanted to get your thoughts on while we're wrapping up the conversation with the Super Bowl and the Rams in particular. There's some interesting rumors. We talked about Donald, the possibility that he retires, which I'm not buying. But before that, I want to ask you about the McVay rumors because they, to me, were even the more perplexing. That it came out that he might consider stepping away from his head coaching role to take a job with ESPN, where apparently they were interested in for Monday Night Football. I mean, at his age, to retire from coaching would be one of the more absurd things you could possibly imagine. A guy who's in his 30s, who's just now reaching the peak of the profession. I mean, that would have really been stunning. So when I heard that, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm curious what you made of that whole thing.
Yeah, I felt the same way, especially to the McVay stuff. I thought that was ridiculous because, as I just said earlier, like the Rams could just never have everything smooth, right? I'm trying to enjoy leading up to the Super Bowl, and then as the day of on Sunday, right before the game, Rodney Harrison's out there saying that, oh yeah, Donald might retire if they win this game. And I'm like we just can't have anything. I feel like every player on the Rams is apparently going to retire if we win. But the McVay one I thought was ridiculous because if you actually look it up and you look into the context of what he said, someone asked him, could you see yourself like a Belichick or someone else coaching into your 60s? And he said hell no to that. Because of the grind, because of how much he puts into it, he couldn't see himself doing this for another 30 plus years. He didn't say he was going to retire tomorrow if they won the Super Bowl. And so, he just saw that, there was other things in life that he can do and that he doesn't see himself being that kind of guy. And then every place, every, institution that writes about sports ran with that and said, could McVay retire? McVay basically confirmed to retire if he wins the Super Bowl. All that stuff started to come out, and then he had to so much as come out and make a statement a few days before the Super Bowl saying that he plans to, his future is here, and he plans, not anytime soon, especially for the remainder of his contract, that he's going to be leaving. Like, I just thought that was ridiculous. I thought it's a possibility. I saw some people say that it could be kind of a negotiation tactic to kind of get, a little bit more money in his next contract, because you could say that kind of the money he's being paid now kind of undervalues given the position of where he was on his last contract. Maybe it's kind of more of a negotiation tactic, but I honestly think he was just honestly answering the question that was given to him, and these sites just kind of ran with it. And it was very frustrating to hear for a week plus.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you cleared that up as far as what happened in the media session there, because when I heard that, I just thought it didn't make any sense. And I couldn't see him coaching into his 60s because he started so young. A guy like Bill Belichick was not a head coach at 30, 31 years of age. McVay was, I think, the youngest at the time he was hired, right, as a head coach.
He was at the time, yes.
Yeah, so I mean,
youngest coach
could
to
go
win a
on to
Super Bowl.
coach. Yeah, he could go on to coach another close to 20 years and only be in his 50s. So it would be kind of strange picturing McVay at 60 years old right now. He just looks so young.
You got to use that old filter to picture that.
Yeah. And then the Donald thing.
Ones.
I mean, we know about the career accomplishments. 7-time first-team All-Pro. Some saying the best defensive tackle of all time. Certainly a guy who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the retirement talk seems a bit premature. Like, that would surprise me.
I think there's a tiny bit more validity to it, just because I don't think there's any validity to Sean McVay. But I think there is a little bit more, validity to it, but I still don't see it happening. I still think while you have Stafford, at least for this next year under contract, even though they're going to work on an extension unless things go horrifically wrong in the offseason and going into this next year, with McVay there, Donald has come out multiple times and he said it's come out publicly. He said it privately, and then reports leaked out that as long as McVay is there, he wants to be there. I just don't see a guy like him, as competitive as he is, as relatively healthy as he's been his entire career, knock on wood, to walk away from the game at his peak where he's still playing the best ever. He just won a Super Bowl. Why would you not want another one with the team the way they're constructed? They can at least, I would say, I don't think they're gonna, they're locked to go back to the Super Bowl next year, but I definitely think they are a lock to be one of those 4-5 contending teams in the NFC next year, barring some massive injury. So why would you walk away from that? I just don't see him doing that. I think there's a little bit more of a possibility, but you saw some shots from the parade as well. It looked like him and McVay and Stafford were talking, kind of a little intimately, maybe about the situation going on. And then he even said, even though Donald was also under the influence at the parade, as many of the guys were, he, took off his shirt, he was shirtless, and on stage he said, "We're running this back." So I don't think that was kind of a moment of him being drunk. I really believe he's coming back for at least one more year. I never heard any rumors of this stuff until Rodney Harrison said it, and I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, so blame Rodney Harrison. He opened up a can of worms there. It wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had to hear it from someone, maybe from Donald himself, but I just think it was another case of, hey, maybe it's been talked about a little bit. Maybe you wanted to go out in a Cinderella moment, but I don't see that happening. It was just everything about the Rams was everyone was retiring. We know Eric Weddle just retired. He re-retired. He tore his pec in the Super Bowl. I saw that play with when he was tackling Joe Mixon. I actually thought he separated his shoulder. He ended up actually tearing his pectoral, and I think 2 different places. He posted a nasty picture of it online. He re-retired. Andrew Whitworth, the left tackle, he is more than likely probably going to retire. There's your retirements, people that want every Ram to retire. I do not think McVay and Donald are going to be in that category. Bri, before we get out of here tonight, just a quick couple, cleanup of news. There's been, speaking of rumors, there's been a couple rumors going on between 2 legendary quarterbacks, and Tom Brady, who had recently retired, and then Aaron Rodgers, who maybe in the next week kind of going to address his situation. Is he staying in Green Bay? Is he retiring? Does he want to be traded? What's going on? The Brady stuff first. He kind of said the never say never on his podcast. Now there's been all these rumors that, and reports that have come out that have also been refuted, where him and Bruce Arians were at odds. There was tension in the room, and that's kind of why he walked away. He would be open to going to the San Francisco 49ers, which was his childhood team. I mean, what'd you make of all that news that's been stirring up in the last couple of days?
Well, when we talked last about the Brady situation, I came out and said I would not be surprised if he did, in fact, come back. And I am still leaning towards that, because the thing I go back to more than anything else, see, you compare it like Brady to Roethlisberger. I don't think there's any chance Roethlisberger is coming back, because when you watched him last year, he looked like he was on his last legs.
He's been done for the last couple of years.
Right. It just looked like he was really headed for the end. With Brady, you're talking about coming off a season that, some are saying was his best statistical season. He had seasons that were better than this, but the bottom line was this was a top-notch season for a quarterback at that age, that he still has plenty left in the tank. So that's why, to me, I still don't believe he's done. I won't believe it until we get to the season and get through the season and Brady didn't play at all. Then I'll say, okay, he's done. Until then, I'm really not closing the door on it. I absolutely could see that face right back in another press conference, not announcing his retirement, but saying that he's coming back, and, the saga continues.
Yes. Is anything possible? Sure. I see some people saying that, like, he might take the year off and then come back. I don't see that happening. I would see if he comes back, it would have to be this year. I think when you start getting into retirement, I understand his work ethic and how he treats his body. Obviously, he owns a company in TB12. But I think as you start getting into that 46-year, 47-year range, and you've been off for a year, I just don't see that happening. I would see if he does come back, it would be this year, and I don't think he's going to come back. I mean, that's my gut feeling. I think a guy like Brady, as competitive as he is, as as a work ethic that he has, as the team that he still has in the Bucks, he's not going to walk away from that when if all he cares about is winning, which is all he has cared about for pretty much his entire career. Why would you walk away from this Bucks team when you have the Aaron Rodgers situation, going on? Could he leave? Could he not leave? You know what the NFC East is. You know what the rest of the NFC North is, even if Rodgers stays there. You know what your own division now in the NFC South looks like. It is putrid. It's horrible. So you're a shoo-in to win that division, and automatically you get at least one home game. I just don't see him walking away from that if he actually didn't intend on retiring. And I think he'll end up sticking. I just think these rumors are going to last, kind of like the Michael Jordan rumors did, right? How long after Michael Jordan retired for the second time did people think, oh, he could come back? He could come back. I mean, we saw these things a few years ago. There was rumors that at age 50, Michael Jordan might return. It's just ways to push narratives. Is there a possibility? Sure. I just think he's satisfied with his next life. Could I see him coming back and coaching? Definitely. I definitely could see him having the competitive drive to coach and do something like that again. Maybe being a QB coach or an offensive coordinator, but I just don't see him playing again.
I agree with the point that if he comes back, that it would be this season. Like, I don't see him taking this year off and then deciding to come back again. At that point, the age would just become too advanced. So I'm with you there. I think if he's to get involved in football, I see it more in an ownership role than I do a coaching role, because I just think his profile probably too big to be like a secondary coach on a staff.
Fair enough.
So I see him, going in like the Elway route or something like that, like Jordan, as we talked about, is now owning, the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA. I could see Brady eventually going down that road.
No, that might be a better assumption and a better guess. I think that is a great point. I also could see him going into broadcasting, very similar to kind of how Peyton and Eli are doing it, where you're not a full-time broadcaster, you kind of do maybe ESPN's detail, and you do maybe a Monday night broadcast here and there or something like that. I could see him doing some more of that stuff as well.
Yeah, just a quick aside. What do you think of the Manning cast? Have you watched it on Monday nights, or do you prefer the regular ESPN?
I love it. I actually prefer the Manning cast. I really love it. I love kind of the looseness of it. I love that they are able to still detail and break down the game. I love the joking around. I love the guests they have. I actually prefer it.
Yeah, I'm the other way, mainly because, I'm kind of a nuts and bolts play-by-play fan. I mean, it's really my dream to someday get involved in play-by-play, and, that's not what they do, obviously. So I don't think the ESPN crew is one of the better announcing crews out there, but the other style doesn't as much appeal to me. I certainly understand it. You do. I know it's been very popular. I know they've gotten a lot of high-profile guests, but for me, I prefer the other style.
No, that's fair enough. I think sometimes it bothered me in games that the Rams were in just because I wanted to focus more on that, and I think more so when it wasn't my team, I could enjoy it the other way, and I found myself sometimes switching back and forth, even though I prefer the Manning broadcast. So I like that the NFL allows us to have options there with both broadcasts running at the same time, even on mobile, which is a lot of times where I end up catching it if I'm stuck at work. So, I enjoyed that, and I want to see what's going to happen with Brady going forward. What'd you think of the Rodgers stuff that's been going on, of his constant drama and rumors? He makes this whole Instagram post last night where he kind of seems like he's either retiring or leaving the Packers at least. It's very emotional. There's a ton of pictures. There's a gigantic post. And then he comes out today and says, like, he just came out of a cleanse. And it was very intense for the last 12 days. And so he was just very overly and hyper appreciative of people in his life. I don't know. He's always a magnet for drama. Here we are talking about him again, just like every other show is that's way more popular than this one. It's just, I'm over it. Are you staying in Green Bay, which I think you most likely are, or are you leaving? Just tell us what the hell you're doing.
Yeah, I'm over it too. I've always been a big fan of Rodgers as a player, but, all this extra nonsense is really starting to become tiresome. So, I mean, I know a lot of people felt that way during the season. A lot of people really turned on Rodgers in the wrong direction. So, yeah, I'm with you. I would just want to hear what his decision is instead of going through this whole rigmarole with social media, which he often does. And it seems like he tells everything to Pat McAfee. Like, that guy must
Yeah.
know his life story because he doesn't tell anybody else. But yeah, I mean, I just want a decision. I know, too, there was a report that came out that the Packers were supposedly prepared to offer like a ton of money for a short-term contract. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're the Packers, it wouldn't be a surprise that you want to do that because you'd want to keep Rodgers, but you just wonder if it becomes too much of a headache and he's going to end up somewhere else. I think retirement is the least likely
I
scenario
agree.
with Rodgers.
Yeah, and they also brought back Tom Clemens, his old-time coach. They bring him back to kind of be OC or whatever, passing game coordinator. So you know that you're appeasing him. You know that they're trying to get guys in there after he lost Nathaniel Hackett that he is familiar with, that he really likes. He's even called Tom Clemens a father figure in his past before. So they brought him out of retirement. I don't think you're doing that if you're not fully intent not only on keeping Rodgers, but thinking that you have a fantastic chance at actually keeping him. And I think it's also an indictment on Jordan Love. I think in that building, regardless of what we've seen, very little of him, and we saw the debacle that was the KC game. I don't think they love Jordan Love, and I think they probably think they missed out on that pick, and they kind of don't want to lose out on a Hall of Fame all-time QB that just won 2 consecutive league MVPs. So, we'll have to see how that plays out as we go into the future of our offseason podcast. But before we go tonight, I want to just talk about one more thing to kind of clean up stuff. We covered all the head coaching and major hires that have been going on the last month or so. I briefly hinted at it because it was all but confirmed, but they confirmed it after the Rams played and won the Super Bowl. OC Kevin O'Connell leaves the Rams. He's going to be the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. There was some flirtations there with also our DC and Raheem Morris and a couple other people. Jim Harbaugh was also someone who was rumored and interviewed for the Minnesota job, I believe at least twice. But Kevin O'Connell, as they call him, the tall Sean McVay, ends up getting the job there. He takes Wes Phillips, actually, which was another coach there with the Rams. We lose coaches every single goddamn offseason, and he's going to be the OC over there in Minnesota. And then the Rams kind of went into the college ranks and hired an OC to be their OC from Kentucky, which will end up being kind of the new coaching tree that ends up going on there. So what do you make of 4 out of 5 years the Rams are changing coordinators? They look like they're keeping Raheem Morris, but they lose Kevin O'Connell. They lose Wes Phillips on their staff, and now McVay has to do it again with another new coordinator, and Stafford's going to have to do it with another new coordinator. What do you think of the hire in Minnesota, and how do you think it will affect the Rams going into next season?
Yeah, the Rams seem to have become like a hotbed for coaching candidates elsewhere.
Yep.
So this just seems to be the latest example. I mean, it's another case where, we were talking about the head coaching changes in a podcast in the past, and it's another one where it's like you don't know because it's a guy who doesn't have experience, another coordinator who steps in to be a head coach, and some of these are going to turn out to be great, and most of them are probably going to be flops. But I mean, I think there's reasons to be optimistic. Obviously, you liked what he did with the Rams staff, and the thing with Minnesota is that they have really good talent. I think we would agree, especially on offense. When you look at Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, you're talking about elite offensive players. But I mean, I think you'd be in agreement that as long as Kirk Cousins is there, it just feels like there's a ceiling with the Vikings, and it's not going to be one that gets them over the top. Like, you could see them making the playoffs, maybe winning about 10 games, but I just don't see. I mean, I felt like Mike Zimmer was a pretty good head coach, and he couldn't get the team over the top. So why would I believe Kevin O'Connell with pretty much the same personnel would be the difference maker? So I just feel like the Vikings are one of those teams that's kind of stuck in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of Cousins is a solid QB, but he's kind of a stopgap. He'll be there for this year, obviously, and then you have to figure out, you got to kind of try to groom and get another young QB in there that you could see as kind of a higher ceiling that might be a little bit more of a risk. Because I just think at this point we know what Kirk Cousins is. He's a good guy. He's someone that is a solid player. He could get a team to the playoffs, but he's just not going to get it done against the upper echelons kind of the league and of the NFL. And I still feel that way, and I think You know, we've seen this head coaching tree for McVay definitely early on be way more successful than any tree that we've seen out of Belichick. We've seen Zach Stacy. He just played in the Super Bowl. You know what Matt LaFleur has done in his few seasons there in Green Bay. You see a lot of talent that has come out of, Brandon Staley's over there in LA. There's been a lot of guys that have come out of this. I believe something like 9 coaches that they've lost to either coordinator or head coaching spots. There's also, I think, the head coach in Arizona in college is also comes from the McVay staff as well. So we're just a breeding ground for coaches. We get plucked every season, and then we have to replace them. And I think it's a challenge every single year. And I don't think it's, oh, hey, they'll groom somebody else and they'll be fine. No, I think it's a challenge to kind of get all that to mesh every year. It's Liam Cohen, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He was the OC in Kentucky. I'm not very familiar with him, but he's going to be now stepping into that OC role in Los Angeles. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Vikings. We'll see what happens with the Rams. There'll definitely be a lot more to talk about. But, Bri, I just want to say, and I hinted at it and outright said it in the last podcast, but hey, man, this concludes 2 full seasons that we've done First and 10. It's crazy to think about. There's something that I think we said last year that we talked about doing, all the way back in high school, and that we talked about doing this. I kind of pitched it to you real quick a couple years ago, and it's just crazy that we're now wrapping up the 2nd full season of this podcast. I mean, I just want to thank you. I can't thank you enough, just for doing this with me, for being my partner on this, and just for having a lot of fun. We're going to have improvements going into next season. We already have plans in motion for that. And I just want to thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun.
It really has, likewise to you, and I just think back to the first one that we did, and we were actually in person using our good friend Dylan's setup, and I think we thought that was going to be our spot most of the time, but, then with the pandemic, things got kind of tricky, so we've gone remote, and I think this setup has worked out well. I mean, maybe we get back to in person at some point, or mixing it in, but I've really enjoyed doing it, and 2 years in the books. I mean, it's really flown by, but this was a really fun football season.
Yeah, it was a great football season. It was definitely the storybook ending for me, and definitely maybe in person, here or there. Definitely would like to get back to some video content. Maybe if we could do that every podcast, even if we are remote, just to kind of have video on screen for you guys out there that are listening. We appreciate you. We appreciate your comments, your likes, your shares of this, and just being there for us and giving those views every single season, every single video. We know these are long podcasts. That's why I put timestamps down below. There'll be timestamps here again. But thank you guys so much for the journey over 2 years. And hey, we'll be back in about 3 weeks or so. You don't have to miss us too much when we kind of go into free agency and we start year 3 of First and 10, which is really, really exciting. I'm looking forward to that, guys. So with that being said, we're going to get out of here tonight. Like the video, subscribe channel, share with your friends if you be so kind. Thank you so much for everything. And until next First and 10, where we kick off season 3, thanks for listening.